The morning mist drifts like slow, silver smoke over Rivendell, curling through the stone arches and along the delicate bridges that arch above hidden streams. And you can almost hear the faint murmur of ages-old secrets brushing against the leaves, as if the trees themselves remember what most have forgotten. The air carries the scent of wet moss and the distant perfume of lilac from hidden gardens. And somewhere far off, a thrush trills a melody that seems to answer some half-remembered question in your mind, making you shiver even though the air is soft and still. You walk along the dew-slick stones, fingertips brushing the cold, carved edges of balustrades, and for a moment, it feels as if the world has paused, holding its breath, waiting for some unseen messenger. You almost swear the wind whispers in a language you almost understand, a tongue older than the founding of Gondolin. And perhaps it does, for tales say Elrond keeps memory stones older than Numenor's fall. And yet, you probably wouldn't survive this if it were a true test of the Istari's power. But that thought flits through your mind like a moth to a candle, as you gaze toward the rising sun, turning the mountain's crags to rose gold. Somewhere in the shadows of an ivy-wrapped tower, a parchment quivers, faintly inscribed with a prophecy long ignored, speaking of 5 travelers cloaked in starlight, their purpose unknown, their fates tangled with men and elves alike. One scholar argues that this line hints at Gandalf's subtle foresight, while another insists it was Radagast, wandering unseen, who discerned the patterns in the stars and trees, reading the future as if it were ink upon leaves. You pause near a fountain where water, clear as elvish crystal, murmurs over carved stone faces, and you catch yourself imagining Saruman pacing in secret chambers, quill in hand, pondering choices no one else dared contemplate, while a faint chuckle escapes your lips at the thought of a wizard's hair being more disheveled than his moral certainty. Around you, the air is full of quiet mischief. A squirrel nibbles upon a nut it clearly didn't earn, and a leaf pirouettes down to the moss, as if mocking the seriousness of prophecy, a subtle reminder that even in destiny, nature has its private jokes. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm really curious, from which part of the world are you watching this video? Write your country in the comments. Let's see how far this little story has traveled. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into a hall of polished stone, where sunlight streams through high, arched windows and dust motes dance like tiny stars in the quiet beams. And you feel immediately the weight of unseen observers, the kind whose presence bends the air subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if history itself is holding its breath. Here, whispered voices weave through the columns, speaking in half-forgotten tongues and elven accents that tremble with the memory of ancient battles and long-lost councils. And you sense that every word, every glance, carries consequence far beyond the room's stone walls. You find a seat upon a low bench, careful not to disturb the faint trail of incense that curls in lazy spirals above the council table. And as you listen, you catch fragments of prophecies and visions. A shadow rising in the north, a dwarf kingdom threatened not by war, but by its own greed, and a suggestion that one wizard may betray another, though who remains veiled beneath layers of secrecy. A faint chuckle escapes you as a raven perched on a windowsill tilts its head, appearing to take notes, and you recall an obscure dwarvish custom when a bird lands atop a council hall. It is considered an omen of discourse, a subtle reminder that nature itself often keeps records more faithfully than parchment. Among the murmurs, someone mentions a sequence of stars that align once every third age, a celestial clock hinting at a moment when choices will matter most, and you can almost feel Gandalf's careful hand upon the table, tapping a rhythm only he hears, balancing patience with foresight, while Saruman leans back, eyes glinting with ambition, silently calculating the paths he may yet take. The debate is quiet but fervent. Some elders insist that these portents are immutable, decreed by Ilúvatar's will, while others argue that interpretation matters, that even the slightest hesitation, the smallest choice, can shift fate's course. You feel your heart quicken at the thought that you are witnessing not just a council, but a nexus where history's currents converge. You notice small, almost humorous details. A candle flickers insistently, as if impatient with the gravity of the discussions, and a mouse scuttles behind a chair, drawing a quiet laugh from you as you imagine Radagast scolding it for interrupting the council's dignity. Yet perhaps it too bears a message in its unnoticed movements. Outside, the wind stirs the trees, a soft susurration that seems to echo the council's concerns, carrying a melody that only attentive ears can decipher. You think of the debates over whether Gandalf foresaw Saruman's fall, or whether events merely unfolded as chance allowed. A scholarly question that has divided lore-keepers for centuries. As the sun arcs higher, glinting off the polished shields and ornaments lining the hall, you feel the subtle hum of latent magic, like a vibration under the skin of reality. And you understand that every glance, every murmur, every soft footstep in this chamber matters more than most mortals could ever know. And you smile, caught between awe and the quiet amusement of knowing that even in places of solemnity, life's small, whimsical details persist. You follow a narrow path winding through ancient pines, their trunks moss-clad and heavy with the scent of damp earth and resin. And somewhere above, sunlight filters through needle-laced branches, casting golden lattices upon the forest floor, as if the world itself has paused to watch Radagast at work. He moves with quiet purpose, feet barely whispering against the carpet of fallen needles, and you notice how birds, squirrels, and even the shy forest deer seem to part instinctively, giving him a respectful berth. For legends say he speaks to all creatures as if they understand the weight of destiny. He kneels beside a cluster of delicate fungi, brushing aside leaves to reveal patterns no ordinary eye would see, spirals and sigils that, according to some forgotten lore, can foretell the coming of darkness or the arrival of hope. And you can almost hear the faint rustle of leaves echoing a language older than men and elves combined. A faint chuckle escapes you as a squirrel drops a nut in the exact center of a mushroom circle, apparently marking its own version of prophecy. Radagast's hands hover over the forest floor, palms tracing invisible lines that glimmer faintly in the soft morning light. And you wonder if this is the same energy that later flows through Gandalf's staff, shaping choices and courage across distant lands, or if it is entirely its own secret force, one that even the Istari seldom speak of. You pause near a bubbling brook, the water bright with reflected leaves, and a small fish leaps in a brief, shimmering arc, as if signaling that Radagast's influence extends even below the surface. An obscure elvish belief tells of a song of stones, the idea that rocks and earth hold echoes of every creature that passes. And for a moment, you feel that the forest itself hums with memory, humming softly in a minor chord that only attentive hearts can hear. Every so often, Radagast stops to stroke the fur of a fox or whisper to a great horned owl perched solemnly upon a branch. And you can't help but smile at the thought that even in the midst of portent and prophecy, there is mischief and kindness woven together. You note the distant pattern of bird calls and think perhaps some of these notes carry more than melody. They may carry forewarnings, tiny nudges that only Radagast's attuned ear can decode. A sudden breeze shifts, carrying with it the smell of blooming heather and faint smoke from some unseen hearth. And for a heartbeat, you imagine Saruman observing from afar, plotting, measuring, and envying the freedom of this woodland wizard whose power is subtle but undeniable. Some say Radagast could bend even the least perceptive animal to his understanding, while others insist he merely listens and the forest obeys itself, offering guidance like a gentle tutor. You crouch beside a small patch of ground where mushrooms glow faintly in hidden light, and you recognize a pattern that reminds you of the star maps Gandalf once showed, suggesting that these terrestrial prophecies mirror celestial ones, a harmony rarely noted by scholars. Yet Radagast seems to navigate it as easily as breathing. Even the leaves seem to lean toward him, murmuring soft, rustling secrets that might tell the future of the Istari, the fate of kingdoms, or the turning of events no mortal eye could foresee. And you can't help but marvel at the way such quiet observances, tiny and easily overlooked, ripple outward to touch the course of history itself. A minor debate persists among lorekeepers. Some insist Radagast merely interprets signs, while others claim he subtly shapes them, nudging fate without the world realizing it. And as you rise to follow him deeper into the woods, the sun now gilding the higher canopy, you feel a serene but peculiar thrill, knowing that even in the heart of untouched forest, the pulse of prophecy beats steadily, hidden beneath birdsong and the soft whisper of wind through leaves. You step into a hall of polished stone, where sunlight streams through high, arched windows and dust motes dance like tiny stars in the quiet beams. And you feel immediately the weight of unseen observers, the kind whose presence bends the air subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if history itself is holding its breath. Here, whispered voices weave through the columns, speaking in half-forgotten tongues and elven accents that tremble with the memory of ancient battles and long-lost councils. And you sense that every word, every glance, carries consequence far beyond the room's stone walls. You find a seat upon a low bench, careful not to disturb the faint trail of incense that curls in lazy spirals above the council table. And as you listen, you catch fragments of prophecies and visions. A shadow rising in the north, a dwarf kingdom threatened not by war, but by its own greed, and a suggestion that one wizard may betray another, though who remains veiled beneath layers of secrecy. A faint chuckle escapes you as a raven perched on a windowsill tilts its head, appearing to take notes, and you recall an obscure dwarvish custom. When a bird lands atop a council hall, it is considered an omen of discourse, a subtle reminder that nature itself often keeps records more faithfully than parchment. Among the murmurs, someone mentions a sequence of stars that align once every third age, a celestial clock hinting at a moment when choices will matter most, and you can almost feel Gandalf's careful hand upon the table, tapping a rhythm only he hears, balancing patience with foresight, while Saruman leans back, eyes glinting with ambition, silently calculating the paths he may yet take. The debate is quiet but fervent. Some elders insist that these portents are immutable, decreed by Ilúvatar's will, while others argue that interpretation matters, that even the slightest hesitation, the smallest choice, can shift fate's course. You feel your heart quicken at the thought that you are witnessing not just a council, but a nexus where history's currents converge. You notice small, almost humorous details. A candle flickers insistently, as if impatient with the gravity of the discussions, and a mouse scuttles behind a chair, drawing a quiet laugh from you as you imagine Radagast scolding it for interrupting the council's dignity. Yet perhaps it too bears a message in its unnoticed movements. Outside, the wind stirs the trees, a soft susurration that seems to echo the council's concerns, carrying a melody that only attentive ears can decipher. You think of the debates over whether Gandalf foresaw Saruman's fall, or whether events merely unfolded as chance allowed. A scholarly question that has divided lorekeepers for centuries. As the sun arcs higher, glinting off the polished shields and ornaments lining the hall, you feel the subtle hum of latent magic, like a vibration under the skin of reality. And you understand that every glance, every murmur, every soft footstep in this chamber matters more than most mortals could ever know. And you smile, caught between awe and the quiet amusement of knowing that even in places of solemnity, life's small, whimsical details persist. You enter a dimly lit chamber where the scent of old parchment hangs thick in the air, and shelves upon shelves of manuscripts rise like silent sentinels, their spines cracked with age, faint glyphs and elvish runes etched into leather bindings that have not felt sunlight for centuries. The flicker of a single lantern casts quivering shadows, revealing dust motes that sparkle as though tiny stars themselves have fallen into the room. An apt reflection for the starfall manuscripts that whisper of destinies long forgotten and of wizards whose influence ripples through time unseen. Your fingers hover over one tome, hesitant yet drawn, and you notice how the script seems to dance beneath your gaze. Letters looping into complex shapes that resemble constellations, as if the stars themselves had lent their form to scribes of old. A faint, bemused smile crosses your lips as a tiny moth flutters across a page and settles precisely on a verse predicting the rise of gray and white, as though nature itself acknowledges prophecy with subtle humor. Among the pages, cryptic references abound. An obscure dwarvish notation about hidden tunnels beneath the misty mountains. A note in Sindarin detailing the bloom of a particular Ithilien flower as a harbinger of wizardly influence. And hints that only the most attentive scholar could discern the faint but unmistakable patterns connecting men, elves, and the Istari. Some lines suggest that Gandalf foresaw certain threads of the War of the Ring, interpreting celestial alignments and ancient omens with a wisdom rivaled only by Elrond himself, while others maintain that such foresight is illusion, that destiny bends only in retrospect, a debate that has lasted generations in quiet scholarly circles. You trace your finger along a passage about the moonlit convergence, a rare night when stars align in a way that reveals secrets hidden even from the keenest eyes. And for a heartbeat, the air itself seems to shimmer, faintly vibrating with the echo of long-past incantations. A mouse scuttles across the floor, pausing to inspect a fallen feather, a humorous reminder that even in the gravest of mysteries, life's small, whimsical moments persist. As you continue reading, the texts describe subtle actions of Radagast in the forests of Eriador, patterns of flight for birds unknown to men, and whispers of entangled destinies with creatures considered insignificant, yet whose movements carry consequences far beyond mortal reckoning. A scholar might argue that the manuscripts suggest a cosmic interplay where choice and chance collide, and yet another insists that the words themselves are a map for those wise enough to read them, a tool for steering fate rather than merely witnessing it. Outside, a breeze stirs the canopy, brushing against the windows, and you imagine stars falling across the night sky in perfect synchronization with the manuscript's hidden rhythm, a dance of destiny mirrored between heaven and earth. You pause for a moment to inhale the musky scent of centuries, aware that you are perched between knowledge and myth, laughter and awe, and that each verse you study might hold guidance or deception, truth or playful jest, a subtle reminder that prophecy is as enigmatic as the wizards who walk its lines. And as the lantern flickers once more, illuminating a final, particularly cryptic verse about a yet unseen shadow that will test all the Istari, you sense that these manuscripts are not merely words. They are a living thread connecting every choice, every secret, every whisper of magic that hums through Middle-earth. You wander through the high corridors of Orthanc, the stone walls cold beneath your fingertips, each polished surface reflecting a pale, calculating light that seems to watch as closely as Saruman himself. And you feel the weight of choices that never were, paths that twisted and forked into oblivion, leaving only whispers of what might have been. In your mind, you trace the steps Saruman might have taken had humility tempered ambition, imagining counsel after counsel where wisdom prevailed. And yet you can't suppress a quiet chuckle at the thought that even a wizard of his stature might misplace his hat and consult it as if it held counsel. Outside, the wind rakes the pine-laden hills, carrying scents of earth, smoke, and distant rivers, and somewhere far below, the Ents stir, their ancient awareness brushing against the edges of your perception, reminding you that even nature has its opinions on choices left unmade. You consider how Gandalf, in his gray simplicity, would have tread more lightly, consulting with birds, elves, and hobbits alike, while Saruman's mind, sharp and ambitious, twists logic into spirals that might have ensnared him had fate not intervened. Some historians argue that Saruman's fall was written in the stars, while others insist it was a consequence of a single, overlooked choice, the loosening of humility's grip. A candle guttering in a distant window makes you start, as if it disapproves of your musings, and you grin at the idea that even inanimate objects in Middle-earth may hold opinion. A subtle joke the ages have left for those paying attention. You pause by a carved balcony, overlooking the forests of Nan Curinir, noticing a fox dart between the trees, a tiny, silent witness to the machinations of immortal and semi-immortal alike. An obscure Númenórean account hints that such animals were often omens, their movements a language lost to most, yet clear to those trained to see. Like Radagast's attentive eyes reading the subtle cues of life around him. In the halls, faint etchings and remnants of scripts speak of councils long forgotten, secret treaties never signed, and subtle manipulations in shadow that shaped kingdoms while the world remained unaware. You almost laugh at the irony that a wizard so intent on domination might be bested by tiny, unseen threads of chance, like a stitch unraveling a tapestry at its edges. As you move deeper into the corridors, imagining alternative paths, you feel the tug of destiny, gentle yet insistent, reminding you that for every choice Saruman embraced, 100 others slipped through the fingers of history, each carrying the potential for triumph or ruin. The air hums softly, a vibration under the skin of the tower, and you think of debates among scholars. Some claim Gandalf foresaw the exact moment of Saruman's corruption, reading the signs like an open book, while others insist no foresight can pierce the tangled web of ambition and desire. That history bends unpredictably beneath even the wisest gaze. A faint laugh escapes your lips as a loose leaf drifts across the stone floor, settling neatly at Saruman's foot, as if nature itself is winking at your speculation. Even in corridors of calculation, life's small, whimsical details persist. And as you step back to glance once more at the forest stretching far below, you understand that paths untraveled can speak as loudly as those taken, and that the story of the White is woven not only from action, but from restraint, temptation, and the quiet hum of possibility that lingers in every shadowed corner. You wander along the moss-lined banks of the river Anduin, the water murmuring soft secrets as it slips past rocks worn smooth by centuries, and you feel the weight of unseen eyes from the distant hills, where Ithilion's forests stretch like green-gold waves toward the horizon, whispering of subtle influences the Istari have left upon the land. The scent of wildflowers mingles with damp earth, carrying a hint of smoke from a distant ranger's fire, and you marvel at how even in lands far from towers and councils, the touch of wizards echoes quietly, shaping events without the notice of men or elves. Radagast's earlier wanderings among the trees seem to ripple outward here, in the bloom of delicate bluebell clusters and the pattern of birdsong that shifts with uncanny regularity, suggesting a hidden rhythm only those attuned to the subtleties of Middle-earth could discern, a tiny but meaningful signature of Istari influence. You smile at the thought that a rabbit's dash or the turn of a leaf could be interpreted as both a joke and a portent. A ranger pauses along a ridge, listening intently, his eyes catching faint glimmers on the river surface, perhaps sensing that the hand of distant wizards brushes even these quiet lands. Some obscure elvish writings suggest that certain flowers, when blooming out of season, signal moments when wizardly intervention is near, a fact almost lost to time, but visible to those who know to look. You trace your steps along hidden paths, feeling the gentle tug of history woven into every stone and bough, imagining Gandalf moving silently through these woods, offering aid in ways no song or story has ever fully captured. While Saruman, somewhere beyond, casts longer, darker shadows, his influence creeping subtly through Ithilion's hills, an almost imperceptible warning of ambition unchecked. A light breeze stirs, brushing your hair, carrying the faint cry of a hawk circling above, and you almost laugh at the thought that nature itself may be conspiring to comment on the affairs of wizards, a playful wink amidst the seriousness of prophecy. In the distance, a deer steps delicately into a clearing, pausing as if listening to invisible instructions, and you realize that the life here flows in a quiet balance, shaped by forces larger than mortals comprehend. Scholars debate whether Gandalf's guidance is deliberate or merely the result of fate's own design, whether every subtle action is intended or a happy accident, and you feel a thrill at the mystery, standing on the cusp of knowledge and wonder. The air hums faintly with the vibration of magic long left behind, the faintest brush of starlight reflecting on the river, suggesting that even in day's brightness, whispers of night and destiny linger, guiding, nudging, hinting. You notice small details, a fallen leaf arranging itself perfectly in the current, the delicate ripple of water over a stone, a faint shimmer across a fox's fur as it pauses mid-step, each a tiny nod to the invisible touch of the Istari. One can almost read the hidden message in these subtle signs, if willing to pay attention. And as you settle against a boulder, listening to the symphony of Ithilien, the rustle of leaves, the call of birds, the soft sigh of river water, you feel a serene understanding that the shadow and the light are entwined, that the quiet lands of Gondor carry stories of wizardly care and intervention often unseen, and that even the smallest whispers of prophecy can echo across generations, leaving subtle footprints for those keen enough to follow. You follow a narrow, winding path through a grove where sunlight filters in fractured beams, dancing upon the soft moss and revealing faint, silver traces of dew, and you feel a subtle resonance in the air, as if invisible threads link the Istari together, pulling silently across distances you cannot yet perceive. The hum of magic is almost tangible, brushing your skin like a gentle caress, and you notice how the movements of birds, the sway of trees, and the ripple of a hidden stream all seem to synchronize. A delicate choreography orchestrated by hands both seen and unseen, whispering of bonds older than the shaping of men or the founding of Gondor. Radagast pauses to lift a fallen branch, examining its intricate patterns as if they encode messages only a wizard's eye can interpret. And you catch yourself smiling at the thought that even the smallest action may ripple into events vast and unknowable, a joke of fate woven seamlessly with purpose. Some obscure Númenórean manuscripts claim that these subtle connections mirror a celestial order, a pattern of stars reflected in the weave of mortal and immortal lives. You notice Gandalf's figure in the distance, moving with deliberate care through hills and hollows, as though he senses the pulse of Saruman far away, the current of his thoughts brushing faintly against his own. And you consider that scholars have debated for ages whether such perception is true foresight or merely the result of careful observation and accumulated wisdom. In a quiet glade, a fox pauses, its tail flicking as if acknowledging the invisible threads that bind all life. And you laugh softly at the notion that a creature so small could serve as messenger for forces so immense. Even in the forest's playful undertones, there is a rhythm that carries messages beyond words, faint portents only recognizable to those attuned to the unseen. You pause beside a babbling brook, listening to its quiet song, and imagine Saruman in his tower, plotting long-term schemes while oblivious to these delicate currents. And it strikes you that the tension between subtle influence and overt action shapes history as much as battles and conquests, a truth that even the wisest elves sometimes overlook. Faint markings on stones nearby catch your eye, tiny runes left by wandering Istari or their allies, suggesting communication across great distances without speaking, a network of intention and observation that few mortals ever perceive. One minor elvish tale even speaks of birds carrying messages between towers, their songs coded in rhythm and pitch, a whimsical yet practical tool in the silent war of knowledge. Scholars still argue. Some maintain that these unseen bonds guided Gandalf toward the path of the ring, a quiet hand steering destiny, while others insist it was chance, mere coincidence, that brought threads together at critical moments. You breathe in the heady scent of pine and wet earth, feeling the pulse of ancient magic beneath your feet, and a subtle wind brushes your cheek, almost as if carrying the laughter of the forest, reminding you that the playfulness of life and the gravity of prophecy are never separate, but woven tightly together. And as you step forward along the shaded path, aware of whispers in leaves, ripple of hidden streams, and the distant hum of mountains, you sense that the bonds of the Istari, quiet, unseen, and profound, tie not only wizards to one another, but to every creature, every forest, every stone touched by their presence, leaving a legacy both playful and profound in its silence. You stand atop a gentle rise overlooking rolling hills where the morning mist clings to the grass like a silvery veil, and the soft murmur of distant streams carries whispers of events yet to unfold, as though the land itself remembers both triumph and tragedy, and gently hints at the choices that will shape the Third Age. Birds flit between trees, their calls patterned and precise, almost like a secret language, and you notice how the smallest details, a rabbit pausing mid-step, the ripple of a leaf on a brook, seem charged with significance, as if nature itself conspires to send subtle portents to those wise enough to notice. Gandalf moves through this landscape with a calm assurance, his staff brushing the moss lightly, leaving faint traces of silver light that catch your eye, and you feel the quiet hum of magic vibrating through the soil, stones, and streams. A tangible reminder that even the unseen hand of wizards influences the course of history. Somewhere in the distance, Saruman's shadow stretches across a hill, a silent reminder of ambition unchecked and the consequences of subtle manipulations. You pause near an ancient oak whose twisted branches cradle moss like green clouds, and recall a minor elvish belief that the patterns in bark can predict shifts in fortune, a secret understood by few and nearly lost to time, while the occasional gust of wind seems to rearrange fallen leaves into signs intelligible only to those attuned to prophecy. A faint laugh escapes you as a squirrel bounds along a fallen log, pausing briefly as if to comment on the gravity of the moment, and you cannot help but smile at how even in portent, life's small, whimsical touches persist. Some scholars argue that Gandalf foresaw certain key events, the rise of men, the fall of dark lords, while others insist that fate itself simply turned its wheel, indifferent to insight or intervention, a debate that has endured in hushed archives for centuries. You notice a heron gliding over a pond, the reflection of its wings tracing fleeting arcs upon the water, and wonder if even these creatures, silent witnesses to history, participate unconsciously in the unfolding of prophecy, a notion that makes you chuckle softly at the thought of an entire ecosystem conspiring in harmony with wizardly insight. Small details abound. A flower blooming out of season, a bird alighting just so on a branch, the soft ripple of water over mossy stones, all pointing perhaps to moments that will demand decisions by those who walk the lands with awareness. The air carries faint echoes of ancient songs, the kind sung by elves in glades now lost to time, and you feel the tug of destiny, subtle but insistent, nudging choices forward, reminding you that even in peaceful mornings, the weave of history is in motion. As you inhale the crisp, early light and watch shadows shift, you understand that portents are everywhere for those who pay attention, and that the Third Age, with all its trials and triumphs, has been quietly guided by threads both visible and unseen, leaving a map of signs for attentive hearts and patient eyes. For every moment contains a whisper of the future if one listens carefully enough. You settle near a quiet stream as evening descends, the water reflecting the soft glow of twilight and carrying gentle ripples that murmur like whispers from ages past. And the air is scented with pine, wet earth, and faint smoke from a dying fire somewhere in the distance, a subtle reminder that even in solitude, Middle-earth hums with life and memory. Above, stars begin to glimmer like scattered jewels across a velvet sky, and you hear the occasional call of a night bird, a gentle note that resonates with the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, merging with the distant rustle of leaves to form a natural symphony that soothes both mind and spirit. Around you, the shadows stretch long, weaving between rocks and roots, and you notice the faint glimmer of fireflies blinking like tiny lanterns along the riverbank, each a small, playful jest from the world itself, reminding you that magic lingers even in the smallest corners, in the tiniest movements, in the quietest sounds. You imagine Gandalf leaning upon his staff nearby, observing with patient eyes, while Saruman's distant silhouette fades into the hills, a silent testament to choices made and roads diverged, and Radagast moves among the trees, invisible yet present, whispering to creatures who carry his counsel in the rustle of wings and the soft padding of paws. A soft breeze shifts, carrying the delicate fragrance of night-blooming flowers, and you inhale deeply, feeling the tension of long journeys and unspoken prophecies ease from your shoulders, a gentle comfort settling over you like a familiar cloak. Obscure elvish customs suggest that listening to water at twilight can reveal glimpses of hidden truths, and you find yourself paying attention, imagining the stories the river might tell if you could only translate its subtle language. Faint laughter of a squirrel, a rustle of wings, the distant howl of a wolf, all small reminders that even amid destiny's gravest weight, life continues with light-hearted persistence, weaving joy into shadow, whimsy into prophecy. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the symphony of night, the rush of water, the sigh of wind through branches, the whisper of magic lingering in the air, and allow your mind to wander through memories of what the Istari have touched, the forests they've walked, the choices they've guided, and the worlds their subtle hands have shaped. Slowly, as darkness deepens and stars glimmer more brightly, your thoughts drift to the quiet bonds among the wizards, the unseen threads that tie fate to intention, and the delicate interplay between ambition, wisdom, and chance, each ripple echoing across hills, rivers, and hearts. A final breath of crisp night air carries the scent of moss and pine. And as the last light fades from the horizon, you feel the gentle hush of the world settle over you. A peaceful reminder that endings are only beginnings in disguise, that magic endures, and that the stories of the Istari, woven in whispers, shadows, and light, linger quietly in every fold of Middle-earth, waiting for attentive eyes to see and patient hearts to remember, leaving you with the soft, serene cadence of river, stars, and the fading glow of campfire embers, a lullaby for the world itself.